Awesome. Thanks, Omar. So next up on the global stage, I'm really delighted to be moderating this panel on blockchain education, keys to a new career. Thank you to our speakers, Apolline Blandin from the Cambridge Centre of Alternative Finance, Thamim Ahmed from UCL Centre for Blockchain Technologies, and Erick Pinos from Ontology. Thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to start this conversation. So Erick, Apolline, and Thamim, are you ready?
Hi,
Yes.
everyone.
Hi. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Apolline. So yeah, let's get straight into it. I really want to get to know you all a bit better. So can you all answer this question for me? How did you get into the blockchain industry? Apolline, I think you can go first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. So I was first involved with the French Association for Tech Startups and Investors, and so there were a few crypto asset companies that were working there. So I was collaborating a lot with them, but I was more kind of interested in the research and academic side. So I decided to focus my research on this, and so I joined the Cambridge Centre for Alternative Finance at the University of Cambridge about 2 years and a half now ago. So yeah, and since then, just focusing on kind of investigating the crypto asset industry.
Fantastic. And Erick?
So I really got involved when I was an MIT student. So I was an undergraduate there, and back in 2014, the MIT Bitcoin Club did the MIT Bitcoin Airdrop, which was a campus-wide program to airdrop $100 worth of Bitcoin to every MIT student.
Fascinating.
Which was a really interesting experiment, and to see like what students did. They got all this Bitcoin all of a sudden. For many students, for most of them, it was their first Bitcoin. It was my first Bitcoin. And so, I mean, Bitcoin was $100, Bitcoin was $200. So everyone got half a Bitcoin. And that kickstarted the MIT Bitcoin Club, kickstarted the meetings, kickstarted the excitement and the interest. And it just grew from there. I mean, for me, I got involved on campus doing a lot of research. And then after graduating, stayed involved, right? That's where I joined Ontology, and just still working with universities, still giving back to campuses.
Great. And Thamim?
I got involved back sort of within sort of my undergrad studies. For my sins, I studied physics, and one of my sort of modules I chose there was sort of quantum information theory. And in quantum information, you have a lot of something called Alice's and Bob's, the sort of two characters around sort of cryptography. Found myself on some of the internet forums and quickly realized it was less about the technology, more about personalities. And as a result, I tried to sort of join the Bitcoin Foundation back in 2014. And my bank at the time didn't accept sort of the £5 membership fee that the Bitcoin Foundation were requesting. And as a result of that, yeah, just sort of realized there's a sort of there are challenges in sort of governance. And I put my sort of, I guess, eggs in one basket. Sort of believed we're going to need stronger governance systems, and as a result, we're going to need regulators and governments involved for this sort of space to grow. And found myself at the Centre for Blockchain Technologies out of University College London. Yeah.
Awesome. So you all have quite interesting backgrounds, but it seems that for those looking for a career in blockchain technology, they might have to go a different route than tech talents and entrepreneurs before them. So with that in mind, what do you think is the best way to strategically establish a career in blockchain technology? Erick, I'd like if you could answer that.
Sure. So I've always found that the best way to position myself for success in the space, especially when I was searching for new opportunities and new projects to work with, is going to sound not possible right now, but I was going to say conferences and travel. I've met every person that I've worked with in the space, or my favorite people to work with in the space. The projects that I've joined have been through people that I've met at conferences. And I think that even though right now we're online, I think there's still a lot of good opportunities through these online conferences, right? And the networking components of online conferences, also on Twitter and the different people on Twitter, following projects that strike your interest, getting involved. I think blockchain as an ecosystem is a very open one. A lot of the projects have developer communities and have open protocols that you can plug into and mess around with. So, oftentimes it's not even as a job, you can get started right away, just contributing to a community protocol. as a community member, and then that will get their attention when you do want to leverage that up into a full-time or part-time position.
Okay, great. And Thamim and Eric, you can answer this for me. Do you think blockchain education should start perhaps earlier than university? Should we be implementing it in high school for those in the UK A levels, the age group 16 to 18?
This is a sort of, I guess, a bit of a tricky question. I think young people should probably continue to have fun before university, and this. But essentially, I think blockchain technology is going to be a bit of a step change as an evolution in industry, and most people won't realize how the payment systems are upgraded. That said, it could be introduced into the curriculum sort of at GCSEs or at A levels within sort of computer science modules or even economics classes. I think the more interesting sort of take on this would be, I was looking at some of these like subgroups on Reddit. You had sort of teenagers buying Bitcoin very early on in the day, and there seems to be a sort of this gaming community that's growing. So there could be, I guess, an opportunity there within the gaming community. How that fits in, maybe sort of extracurricular clubs at schools, which could be rolled out. But yeah, not too heavy, sort of in terms of being it rolled out before
That's fair.
high school.
Apolline, I have a really great question for you. So, a lot of research and funding and courses on blockchain education tend to be in Europe and America, but what can be done to provide these same opportunities here in Africa? Are partnerships with local universities possible, for example? What do you think can be done to bring those opportunities here?
Yeah, actually, it's a great coincidence because so the CCAF created an online course for regulators, kind of looking at fintechs, and so we do have a module looking at crypto asset and blockchain more generally, and the effort is really to have a global audience. So we really try to reach out to regulators from all around the globe, and we actually have very active participation from regulators in sub-Saharan Africa. And the goal with this is also to kind of broaden the scope of this audience and not only focusing on regulators, but also trying to get other type of market participants attending the course and getting more and more familiar with the topic. So, I mean, we can really seize this opportunity of, everything going online to make sure that it is more globally spread.
Okay, great. And Apolline and Eric, this is a question for you both, and I'm really happy Apolline brought up, regulation. In what ways do you think blockchain and crypto regulation could affect the rates of blockchain education globally, and why? So Apolline, could you go first, and then Eric can answer after?
Yeah, I would actually like to kind of inverse the question a little bit. I think education can do more to regulation than regulation can do to education. And again, that's kind of the purpose of this course, because what we see is some regulators in certain jurisdictions are very sophisticated and have a lot of resources to get to grasp with new technology. Whereas like in other regulators where they are more constrained in terms of resources, it's really important to make sure that we can expand and share knowledge with these regulators and improve their familiarities and understanding of that topic. And then in turns, if regulators are better educated on the topic, then they can probably kind of set up regulation that really support the development of a crypto asset industry.
That's a very valid point, and you're actually right. It's better the other way around. Eric, what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think I agree that it's the other way around for the most part, but I do think that there are also the elements of regulation potentially curbing or stopping education, which could be an issue especially within schools, because getting blockchain curriculum is difficult, getting approved by Common Core, right? Especially if you go into like high schools and such, there's a lot of restrictions on what you can and cannot teach. So that's always a barrier, right? And if regulations go towards the route of more restrictions, then that just becomes harder as an element to teach. I know that the Blockchain Education Network, which is a network of universities and blockchain clubs, for a long time worked with only students and student clubs, because working with the universities themselves, they saw blockchain as a very sketchy thing, right? And Bitcoin is a very sketchy thing. So it was very difficult in the early days to get accredited courses. Now, obviously, that's changing. So I think if there were more regulations that were in support of blockchain and legitimizing crypto assets, it would definitely make it easier to establish more accredited courses about it.
That's good. That's a good point. This is a question for all of you, and I'd like Thamim to answer it first. You know, you've kind of brought it up. There's this perception of blockchain and crypto in general, a lot of misinformation online. What are you all doing, UCL, Cambridge, Ontology, and the Blockchain Education Network? What are you doing to counteract the spread of misinformation around blockchain and crypto?
Oh, this is an interesting question. I remember back in 2017, 2018, I found one of my pictures on like an ICO project. The name on that was Jackie Chan. And I was sort of like, wow, I'm not sure if I should be chuffed or not, but I was like, definitely don't look like a Jackie Chan, or maybe I do, I don't know, but I'm not as talented as him. So I think first of all, academic institutions and the sort of academics associated need to be very transparent about the projects that they're working on. So very clearly sort of stating their partners, if individual sort of academics are involved with projects themselves, they need to sort of mention them on their personal sort of profiles as well, just to make sure there's no bias. That's the first thing. And then sort of also being very clear with partners in terms of not taking any bias in their certain projects. And the main objective should be for those partnerships to add to the body of knowledge around blockchain technology and the underlying research within that. Otherwise, yeah, it's unfortunately it's a bit of a universities are quite resource stricken. It's a difficult one to regulate, but the policies should be transparent and fair across the board.
Okay, great. Apolline and Erick?
Yeah, I completely relate to that. I mean, I think the transparency is very important when you conduct research on the industry. You have to make sure that there is no conflict of interest. So that's one thing, and just generally also because it's, although we've been like 10 years in the making, it's still a emerging industry. So making sure that we provide data and reliable research on it, so that it can become like a growing body of literature and research around the topic. That's very important, and I guess that's what we're doing at CCF, trying to provide reliable information and data points on the evolution of this industry.
Okay, great. Erick?
Yeah, I agree. I think that Ontology, we work with a couple of universities now, and all of the agreements are non-binding, right? We support from a research and academic perspective. The students are working on different projects, and they get to explore their interests, produce research out of the outcome. That's the goal. But we're not trying to influence it in any which direction. It's exploratory, right? And so whatever they produce is for them and what they produce. We also run a couple of non-university related research centers that also produce research and reports for the industry. What the Blockchain Education Network does, and Ontology works very closely with the Blockchain Education Network, working with a lot of the universities that are part of the network. And the Blockchain Education Network has an open source Wikipedia style repo of blockchain educational content that's been submitted to by students, by professors. So it's just been collected to over the years for people that want to share their education and share their lessons that they've made for their individual universities and for their individual classes and clubs with each other. So that has like no agenda or isn't particular towards any particular project, right? Like as long as it's not a known scam, like there's the opportunity there for students to learn about it, and it covers all different sorts of topics. So there's like no kind of maximalism there. Like we've taught about every different kind of topic, every blockchain based topic that you can find, because all over the world there's so many different interests, especially where you're from and what industries are particular to where you are.
Mm-hmm. Okay, as this is the Africa section of the panel, I really want to drive this down to this region. We often talk about Africa being the future. We have a high youth population, but we also have, increasingly high rates of unemployment. So for example, in Nigeria, I think it's about 20% unemployment, and South Africa is almost 30% in these countries. So with this high youth population, how can blockchain education reduce the levels of unemployment and make African youth competitive on a local and global stage?
If I may start on that. I think I'll talk from I'm not in a position to sort of comment from a local perspective, but I guess from a foreign investment sort of outlook, I can share some insights. We're seeing like a very big squeeze on profitability of the big tech companies or any sort of developed organizations. So there is a massive competitive push to get into emerging markets. And the thing about digital, so the nature of digital assets is it's a global remit. So if any of these organizations can have their regulatory sort of groups in your London, your New York, Singapore, Abu Dhabi now, even of the world, they can set up local offices in these developing countries. By educating sort of local employees on sort of blockchain technologies, we will begin to see a push for sort of securities to start to emerge in these markets. So if local governments engage from a regulatory perspective to make sure they engage this sort of global securities outlook, there can be an opportunity to introduce sort of innovations around sort of local securities, if that kind of makes sense. So having regulatory offices in London, let's just say, for example, the London Stock Exchange, you've got a lot of foreign investors that are looking to invest into ESG funds, sort of the green sustainable funds. You can have those investors sitting in London, but they could be investing into the innovation side of things locally in Nigeria or South Africa. So you have that regulation on chain, but the innovation happening locally. And that can only happen by sort of ensuring that there is a good level of education in blockchain applications at a local level.
Okay, great. I've got one more question before we have to round up. I think we have to go to the next panel soon. And I'd really like Erick and Apolline to answer this one. What other things outside of university, what can employers across industries do to educate their current staff about blockchain technology? Apolline, could you go first, and then Erick, and then we'll wrap up.
I think the blockchain space is still, kind of very broad, and a lot of things can fit into blockchain. So I think it's very important if companies and employers can provide, minimal basic knowledge on the industry and the technology, so that everyone kind of speaks the same language when they talk about their businesses and the different innovation happening in the space.
Okay, great. Erick?
Yeah, I think that a lot of the education happens online. So giving employees a good memo, or sending out a memo for like, oh, this is blockchain, this is the stuff online. I know when I was working at NASDAQ, they had sent out a company-wide memo like, okay, we got to address Bitcoin. Right? Like, here's Bitcoin, here's all the stuff about it, here's what we think, and then here's some good resources for you to learn more about it. So I really like that approach. And then I think also extending that into like lunch and learns and doing like physical, or I guess not, like Zoom or physical, whatever events you can do to teach employees, especially because there's also a lot of conflicting information, right? Like there are a lot of scams in the space, and there's a lot of, weird things that are happening in the space. So people definitely need more guidance in terms of navigating especially the educational resources, to avoid content that's like more promotional, and to stick with content that's more purely like educational, presenting the facts around different initiatives.
Great. Well, thank you all, Apolline, Thamim, and Erick. Thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure having you, and you gave us such great insight into the blockchain education space. Have a great day, and we will be proceeding to the next panels.